From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has rejected new sanctions imposed by the United States against his country. Arreaza said the sanctions do not comply with international law. During a press conference, the foreign minister said he had discussed the actions of U.S. President Donald Trump with the international observers of Sunday's elections. He added that the Venezuelan people will not be intimidated by measures imposed by other countries. U.S. President Donald Trump signed off a new round of economic sanctions on Monday afternoon, include an executive order prohibiting U.S. citizens from carrying out certain financial transactions with the government of Venezuela. The executive action also prohibits the purchase of any debt owed to the government of Venezuela and any debt owed to the country that it is pledged as collateral. It also prevents the government of Venezuela from liquidating assets it has a majority ownership of. Meanwhile, a number of Chilean assembly members and various organization leaders have expressed their support for President Nicolás Maduro's re-election and the independent future of the Bolivarian Revolution.
I think the Venezuelan people have resisted with a lot of bravery the shameless intervention. It's what they did in Chile, creating an atmosphere of chaos and shortages when they are only seeking to end the Bolivarian Revolution.
The people have come out to defend this process. We haven't had this kind of process in Chile. What is happening in Venezuela surprises us because mainstream media says there's chaos. But the truth is that people are out in the streets voting. That means that media is trying to misinform people. Luckily, there are some media like Telesur or RT.
Our solidarity is with the Venezuelan people, with the Venezuelan government, with this democratic demonstration. Our leader, President Rafael Correa, will be in Venezuela as an international observer. It's a democratic process that we ratify in Ecuador.
El pueblo venezolano.
Venezuelan people and the Bolivarian Revolution have prevailed through electoral processes. It's one of the countries in Latin America that have had the most elections.
The president of the Council of Electoral Experts of Latin America, or CELA, Nicanor Moscoso, also weighed on the electoral process held on Sunday.
En nuestro informe, en las conclusiones,
we can report that we took part in the audits of the election process, scrutinized the system, and checked that the voting machines and the transmission system worked properly. We concluded in our report that the results given by the CNE are a perfect reflection of the will of the Venezuelan people.
We spoke to our Caracas correspondent Ian Bruce about allegations of fraud regarding the Venezuelan vote.
Well, I think, Soini, the clearest answer to those accusations came this morning in the remarks made by Nicanor Moscoso. He's the president of the Commission of Latin American Electoral Experts, one of the most important components of the 150 plus guests or observers who are accompanying this election process. And in the declarations that they made to the media earlier today, Moscoso said that they thought that the results should be respected because, in his words, they were a perfect reflection of the will of the Venezuelan people who went out to vote on Sunday. That was pretty categorical, and that's certainly a feeling that that we got from just about everybody who went that we spoke to, that we saw during the vote. That it was a very calm, peaceful process, and people definitely, the people who went to vote at least, definitely believe in their electoral process. Now, the opposition candidate Henry Falcón, who just shortly before the first almost final results came out, said that he wasn't going to recognize the results, referred to 900 supposed electoral regularities. As far as we can understand, what he's talking about there are the so-called red points, which are the little kiosks set up near voting stations by the party, in this case the PSU, the Socialist Party, the governing Socialist Party, to check on whether their people have voted and try and get their vote out. I mean, now, as the government has responded, and this was also echoed by some of the international guests, observers this morning, that is a very, very common practice in Latin America and much more widely, where members of parties gather outside voting stations to check off who of their people have voted and try and make sure they get the other ones out. There's really nothing very strange about that, and they saw absolutely no evidence that people were being coerced by that or pressured into voting one way or another.
Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza was joined by Javier Couso and Manuel Pineda of the Communist Party of Spain. 5 delegates from the party participated as companions in Venezuela's election and said that the electoral system was the most transparent and reliable of all. The processes they have seen so far have been, this one was the West. They also said that Europe should adopt a similar system.
I wish we had a system that was even remotely similar to yours. Congratulations for your system. Congratulations for the great victory, a valiant victory during the context during which the people are suffering from the consequences of a criminal economic war. But despite this, never kneel down. But if you must kneel, do so only on one knee, to defend your people, your government, and your revolution.
On their part, members of the Lima group voiced opposition to Sunday's vote.
The Chilean government deeply regrets the situation to which Nicolás Maduro's government has driven the great nation of Venezuela. He has put it on a path to nowhere. He has put his people on a road with no way out. We deeply regret the profound economic, social, and political tragedy of coexistence, lack of food, and lack of medicine that our Venezuelan brothers are living through. And we once again warn the government of Nicolás Maduro that these catastrophic measures he is taking against his own people have generated migration that is affecting the entire hemisphere.
On May 27th, presidential elections will take place in Colombia. However, reports of electoral fraud are already starting to mount.
Just days before Colombia's presidential elections, Gustavo Petro reported an imminent electoral fraud case, which questions the transparency of the process.
The State's Council task was to check the software during the audits. Today, just a week before the elections, this still hasn't happened. That means that CNE and the registration office didn't follow orders.
These reports were already made by the Peace and Reconciliation Foundation in their latest statement.
We have our doubts with regards to the software. We think there's a risk of fraudulent activity.
President Santos has said that there will be an observation group, but Petro thinks the opposite.
The president lies. We never asked for observation. We asked him to check the software, which presents algorithm modifications that might end in fraud. Our European counterparts can't aid us in this. They don't have the experience to audit the software. Yesterday, the president deceived the public.
Another accusation of potential voter fraud is centered around electoral jury designation, something about which the Peace and Reconciliation Foundation has also made vocal warnings.
We don't like the jury. That random way in which people get those charges is really concerning.
The registrator stated that the accusations from both Peace and Reconciliation and Petro make no sense. The national government then called for an extraordinary meeting of the National Electoral Guarantees Commission.
The national registrator must present a report about the audits made to check the software. The jury designation process must also be explained by him.
What won't be possible is to have an observation board from the EU to check the software, which created instability in these elections. On top of this, 8 years ago, law dictated that the national government establish an electronic vote system, but it still doesn't exist. This year, people will again have to vote manually.
In Nicaragua, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights has concluded that security forces used excessive force against the anti-government protest that started on April 18. The commission, which was invited by the government of Daniel Ortega, arrived in the country on May 21st to investigate alleged human rights violations and share their findings in a report. According to the Commission's report, at least 76 people were killed and 868 wounded at the hands of police and others. As many as 438 people were detained, many without charge. Sandinista supporters have accused protesters of provoking this violence. The Nicaraguan Foreign Minister Denis Moncada said the government will now study and analyze the report. The Commission on Human Rights also recommended the government guarantee the right to protest and stop violent repression.
The objective of this visit is for a preliminary observation of the human rights situation in the country in regards to the violent incidents that have taken place since 18th April this year, and to document these incidents and to put forward the first concrete recommendations to the state.
Meanwhile, the dialogue between the government and several sectors of society has resumed. Students and civil society members who are taking part in the talks have asked the government delegation to endorse the 15 recommendations made by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Cardinal Leopoldo Brenes, who is mediating the dialogue, said authorities have committed to establishing a monitoring mechanism as the Commission recommended.
In accordance with recommendation number 15, the government of the Republic of Nicaragua makes the commitment to establish a monitoring mechanism with the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights at the National Dialogue Table to verify the implementation of the recommendation issued in the framework of the present visit, of the report and the schedule, together with the EACI chair, a specific calendar of new visits in such a way that a follow-up commission is formed from the dialogue.
We'll take a short break now, but join us after this video from our multimedia team. Welcome back. The director of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, says Argentina needs a financial plan that promotes growth and stability. In an interview, she said that conversations between the IMF and Mauricio Macri's government will continue over the next few days.
In spite of the distress the agreement with the IMF has caused to the Argentine society, negotiations continue. Mauricio Macri's government has even promised to speed up the process to reach an agreement.
We also want to lower the deficit, but that means we have to adjust things for those who benefit from tax exemptions, like big mining companies. We should also stop paying our debt and have an audit to reevaluate our priorities. I think we must nationalize some companies and banks. We must try to plug the economic leak that takes all of our national savings away.
For some experts, the appointment of Nicolas Duhovne, the current Minister of the Treasury, as Super Minister of the Special Economic Cabinet, will make the crisis even worse. Nonetheless, President Macri put him in charge of 9 ministries, as well as of the negotiations with the IMF.
Rich people are the real problem in our country. They keep amassing wealth that belongs to the state and devastating natural resources. They don't invest, they funnel funds outside of the country, they don't pay taxes, and this government doesn't do anything because it belongs to them.
Different sectors of the society are concerned about what is being discussed in these negotiations. Economic growth and the budget for 2019 are in the hands of Duhovne.
He's a puppet of the IMF and of the transnational companies that are robbing Argentina, that come to appropriate our wealth. This agreement with the IMF is part of the strategy to steal the resources of our people. That's why we must take to the streets.
Multiple protests are being prepared against the negotiations as the IMF moves to officially approve the deal.
Still in Argentina, the streets of Buenos Aires were overtaken by thousands of people who mobilized in support of former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva over the weekend. Thousands gathered for a rally and a concert calling for freedom of the political prisoner and justice for Mariel Franco, who was assassinated in a politically motivated killing in the month of March. Argentine artists and activists crammed into the Plaza de Mayo, said that their struggles under Macri are very much connected to Brazil under Michel Temer. In Paraguay, activists have protested in front of the Israeli embassy in Asunción. Demonstrators organized a die-in protest against their country's decision to move its embassy to Jerusalem. Paraguay is the third country after the US and Guatemala to move its embassy to Jerusalem. However, this decision has to be approved by the new Paraguayan president-elect Mario Abdo Benítez. Under international law, Jerusalem is a city in dispute to be divided between Israeli and Palestinians. Pope Francis has told one of the victims of sexual abuse that it is acceptable to be gay. Speaking in an interview on Sunday, Juan Carlos Cruz, one of the Chilean priest Fernando Caradima's victims, said that the pontiff told him, "Juan Carlos, that you are gay does not matter. God made you like this and loves you like this, and I don't care. The Pope loves you like this. You have to be happy with who you are." This is not the first time Pope Francis takes a stand on the importance of accepting homosexuality. During his first overseas trip in 2013, Pope Francis said, "If a person is gay and seeks God and has goodwill, who am I to judge?" Meanwhile, the 34 Chilean bishops who resigned en masse after a meeting with the Pope have returned home. It is still unknown whether Pope Francis accepted the resignations or not. The president of the Chilean Episcopal Conference, Santiago Silva, said in a letter that the country's church needs an urgent, intense, and extended renewal that should begin with an open dialogue. Pope Francis has announced the election of 14 new cardinals to be sworn in on June 29. The new cardinals will come from 5 different continents and 11 countries, including Iraq, Pakistan, Japan, Peru, Mexico, and Bolivia. Since his election as pontiff, only a third of the cardinals chosen by Pope Francis have a European origin, which reflects his strategy to also give importance to the global south. And one of the new cardinals amongst the 14 chosen by the Pope is an Aymaran bishop from Bolivian capital city La Paz. 81-year-old Toribio Ticona grew up in poverty, raised in a single-parent house with a mother that could not read or write. He is said to share the pontiff's own thrifty lifestyle. Ticona and the new cardinals will be given their traditional red hats on June 29.
The new Bolivian cardinal, Monsignor Toribio Ticona, is an 81-year-old Quechua native. He comes from very humble origins and used to sell newspapers to help his mom. He also worked as a shoeshine boy, mechanic, construction worker, and chief of the National Brewery Company in Potosí. When he was 30 years old, he started his priesthood journey and has worked mostly with mining centers. He was the mayor of the Chacarilla municipality for 13 years in the rural area of La Paz department. He used to carry out his work as mayor after he held Mass. Pope Francis just announced him as the new Bolivian cardinal. This was greeted by President Evo Morales, who is also a Quechua native. Other Catholic bishops introduced him to media on Monday. He said that he will use his close friendship with President Morales to improve the relationship between the state and the Catholic Church. Since 2009, Bolivia constitutionally dropped Catholicism as its official religion, declaring itself a secular state.
That was Fede Morales, our correspondent in La Paz. Cuba is holding the first funerals of the victims of last Friday's plane crash. In the eastern city of Holguín, families have received the first coffins. More bodies will arrive as they are identified in the Institute of Forensic Medicine in the capital city of Havana. The number of victims in the plane crash raised to 111 after one of the 3 survivors died on Monday. An ongoing investigation is trying to determine the cause of this accident.
I could have taken that flight, but I came a day before. Thank God. It's terrible. It's horrible. This event has deeply affected us, not only the people in Holguín, but all Cubans. This is something that has shocked us. It's something very difficult and sad for relatives, friends, and for people in general, for each person that feels Cuban.
We feel really sad because we lost 67 Holguín citizens and we are all like a family. I want to send my support to relatives in this difficult moment and share with them this pain.
We're taking one last short break, but join us after this video from our multimedia team.
Ma'am, the reason I asked you for your ID is because I came in here and I saw that you guys are speaking Spanish, which is very unheard of up here.
Your staff should be speaking English, not Spanish.
Because of people like you, our nation is...
Welcome back. South Korean President Moon Jae-in has arrived in the United States to meet President Donald Trump 3 weeks before planned talks between the U.S. and North Korea. They are likely to discuss a joint strategy for dealing with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Last week, Kim Jong-un threatened to pull out of a scheduled June 12 summit in Singapore. The Syrian army has declared that it has taken full control of all areas around the capital Damascus for the first time in 7 years. The announcement came after troops cleared opposition fighters from the Yarmouk Palestinian refugee camp and the Hajar al-Aswad district. The forces will continue to search houses and tunnels for hidden suicide attackers and snipers. Support from Russia and Iran has enabled President Bashar al-Assad's troops to retake control of the capital and other cities in western Syria.
In the last period of the operation, we surrounded the local extremists, and the encirclement became very small as we are closed in. The combat with extremists became very short range, and we eventually neutralized them.
Italy's new coalition has proposed a law professor as the new prime minister. Here's more on that and other big stories from around the world.
A heat wave has killed 65 people in Pakistan's southern city of Karachi over the past 3 days. Temperatures surged to 44 degrees Celsius this week. Authorities fear of more casualties. The situation is aggravated by the power outages and the holy month of Ramadan, when most Pakistani Muslims do not eat or drink during the daylight hours. The two populist parties who won Italy's election, anti-migrant the Northern League and anti-establishment the Five Star Movement, have put forward a newcomer to politics for the post of Prime Minister. The nominee is 53 years old Giuseppe Conte, a law professor at the University of Florence. Conte still needs to be confirmed by the president, most likely in a meeting with the parties on Tuesday.
We have given to the president the name of the person we think is best placed to push forward, with solid leadership, the government contract, which we will soon sign, between the two political forces who have worked on this contract for the last week and a half.
In Australia, the Archbishop of Adelaide, Philip Wilson, has been found guilty of concealing child sex abuse. Wilson is expected to be sentenced in June. He faces a maximum sentence of 2 years in jail. He's accused of hiding a series of child sex abuse by another priest in 1976. He's the most senior Catholic in the world to be convicted on such a charge.
In the frozen forest of Mongolia's Kufgul province, reindeer herders have maintained a traditional lifestyle for generations. Far away from modern world, the Duka ethnic group roam with their herd of reindeers. They provide food, tools, and transportation for this tiny community made by only 280 people, who are considered by some to be one of the smallest ethnic groups in the world. And with that story, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and others you can find on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And be sure to also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.